Welcome to Extension Connection on Super Talk 1270. Thoughtful information and discussion with experts from both Burleigh and Morton County Extension Service offices. Extension Connection provides advice on family nutrition, issues in agriculture, lawn and garden, community leadership, homeowner concerns, and so much more. Live from the Super Talk 1270 studio, this is Extension Connection.
Good morning and welcome to the Extension Connection. I'm Peggy Netzer, Family Nutrition Program Agent with the Burleigh County Extension Office, here with Ashley Stegman, our Ag and Natural Resources Agent, and we are kicking off a new year.
We are. It's a Happy New Year to all our listeners out there. Excited for what's to come in 2016.
Yeah, so today we are just going to do kind of a recap of last year.
Yep, exactly. We're going to talk about some highlights from 2015, what we experienced maybe in the office, what we saw through markets in the ag world, and then talking, just kind of wrapping up about, what were some of those gardening things that we had to deal with in 2015. So there's a lot of things that happened in 2015 looking back. One of the big things I think about, and this was something that a lot of farmers, ranchers, anybody really that's a land owner was inundated with this new farm bill.
Yes.
That was something that came out 2014, and
everybody had to figure it out at the
everyone
beginning
had
of
to
last
figure
year.
it out.
Yep.
And there were a lot of people that seeked Extension's help to figure out what is the government doing? What do they mean? What do we have to do here? And so, we did have a lot of people, come through our office doors. There were 70 meetings across the state helping our farmers and ranchers make these kind of decisions. And, it was something that was due. They had a hard deadline. And guess what they did?
Extended it.
They extended it twice. So, thanks, I guess, government. But, when we get deadlines, I'm kind of a stickler. I like to stick to a deadline and be done with it. So, I guess thank you, government, for that. And really, that farm bill, it was for 5 years. So, if you signed in 2015, you're locked into that program until 2020 now.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of discussion. Well, is it really going to pay off? We don't know. In the past, we haven't really seen much from it. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't know what it's going to be.
Nope. I think it's too early.
I think it is. It is still too early. And the sad thing is that farm bill really was it was more of a protection plan for our farmers. And so, thankfully, we haven't had any disasters. We may think the prices right now might be drastic, but we haven't had anything that has ruined or completely annihilated our crop production. So we're probably not going to see any payments for 2015. We will just have to wait and see. Like I told all the producers that I worked with, it's not something we really want to cash in on. It's something that...
It means something bad happened.
It means something worse happened, and it's there just to kind of be a little cushion for you. So thankfully, that was done, that was over with, and that ended... The deadline was initially February.
Yeah.
And they moved it to April. Well, it was March and then it was April. And, I still had people, I'll never forget, it was April 15th it was due. I still had people April 14th calling. And my thoughts were, this was due 2 months ago. You needed to get this done. And so, that was something we spent a lot of time on. I hope everybody feels comfortable with it now. And I guess we'll have to wait till 2020 for the next possible farm bill. We'll just have to see.
My program is funded from the farm bill. So I was really happy that it was a 5-year deal, because that means that for us, there's not going to be any really big changes for 5 years. So that's it's nice rather than the 1-year extensions that they were doing. So, okay, we're good for a year, no big changes. And then it goes back, okay, we're good for another year, no really big changes. Or maybe there were big changes, but it was just a 1-year thing. And so the 5 years was really, it was kind of an exciting thing.
You were kind of
welcomed.
welcoming
Welcoming
that.
A 5-year plan.
Yeah. And, I think it was a lot to understand.
Yes.
But after we were able to run some numbers and show farmers, okay, it's not as scary as you think. Really, we just need to plug this number in and this, and if
figure out
all the
what's the right
stars
thing.
align, maybe this would happen type thing.
Right.
And so it really wasn't. It wasn't too bad. A lot of I had one producer say it's just like a lottery system. I feel like I'm gambling here, and so sorry
kind
for
of.
that, but at least we're not having to cash it on it.
Right.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think with that,
Yeah,
it
we got to
sounds
take a little
like
break.
We're taking a break. We'll be back.
Right now, 16.
The Jim Bohannon Show is here. Super Talk 1270.
All right, welcome back to the Extension Connection. I'm Peggy Netzer here with Ashley Stegman, and we were talking about all the things that happened in 2015. Kind of the highlights or maybe lowlights, some of it, I guess.
Some people might consider it
Depending
low, right?
on your perspective. So we talked about the Farm Bill and how that was kind of a big deal for a lot of people.
That was a big deal. The next thing that really kind of, here in North Dakota, we didn't experience so much havoc from it, but avian influenza. That
bird
was
flu.
very, commonly called bird flu. That was something that really wreaked havoc across the nation.
Yeah.
Here,
I almost said back home because for both of us,
Oh, yes,
it
back
hit
home.
back home where
Yes.
we would call back home.
Yes, that is right. And it was something that I guess the effects that we saw through our office is with our 4-H program, they canceled all types of poultry exhibits. So there were no poultry shows, which I'm going to be honest, I'm okay with. I am not really a fan of the birds, but I like to eat chicken and turkey, but I just don't like to handle them. Yeah. So, but that was...
And you never like to see anything taken away from the kids,
That's right.
And especially that was kind of a late game decision.
Yep.
And so these kids had kind of been working on their project, and then at the last
and then at
minute,
the last
they're
second,
like,
they weren't
sorry.
able to exhibit. So that was kind of rough. We saw... I guess what I saw affect, at the grocery store was the price of eggs.
Yes.
That was...
It's basically tripled.
That's right. And so just a little knowledge there. We have our hens and then our broilers. Our broilers are the ones that produce that meat that we are eating all the time, that poultry. And this did not really affect our broilers. And so why you didn't see a fluctuation in the price of chicken, poultry, that's because the broilers, they weren't affected by this influenza. It was the laying hens that were affected. And so there were, I know back home, we did have a large hatchery, if you will. They did have avian influenza, and they had to clean out all 7 barns and euthanize all of those chickens. And so that was really hard for that small town community back home.
There was turkey.
Oh, okay, turkey back home. Yeah, so that was something that was a big event that happened in 2015. And then I guess shifting from poultry that we consume to beef, we saw really some high record dollar amounts on beef in 2014. Well, whatever goes up does come down at some point. And so we did see a drop in price of live cattle. And, we had a lot of cows, bred heifers that were being sold for $2,000. Well,
How much does one normally sell for?
You hoped for about 1,000.
Okay.
You really do.
So that was a good price, $2,000.
That was a nice bump in price. Now we're seeing about $800. So it is dropped. It's dropped more than expected. And that kind of just plays in with all the markets. So that's something that I hope we don't see more droppage. Hopefully we see maybe some increase on it. And the other thing you'll remember is when you bought your steak or your hamburger for, 4th of July or whatever celebration, you're paying a pretty high premium for that. And so we have seen the price of ground beef fall, which is nice. But, that kind of goes back to those cows aren't worth much, our hamburger's not going to be worth much.
Right.
So that's kind of how that all flows. The next thing, I guess I really don't have much to talk about when it comes to pork because here in North Dakota, we don't really produce a lot of pork, especially on the eastern side of state. We may have a few more confinements out that way, and they really have come back. 2 years ago, they had that PED virus.
Pig flu.
I don't know if I'd call it pig flu, but it was.
I just
called
call everything
PED.
the flu.
And
Pig flu, bird flu, horse flu.
No horse flu. No, that would be very, very wrong. But the pork industry has really come back, and it's really surprising how well they have bounced back from that epidemic. And so that's good to see. Your bacon's not as expensive. If you remember, we were paying $7 or $8 a pound for bacon. And so now that's more $5,
Closer to
$6.
$5,
So, everybody likes bacon. Everybody needs bacon. So Jim says
raised
yes
his hand.
too.
He's
So
a fan of bacon.
I know. We make our own bacon, and I was like, I can't believe I went and bought a pound of bacon because we were out. And I'm like, I can't believe it's this expensive. Like, oh man.
Yeah.
But with all the livestock markets, they all kind of need one thing. What do they need, Peggy?
They need.
What do we all need to survive?
We need shelter, and we need good health, good food, and
ding
water.
ding ding. Food and water. That's something we all need, whether we're of the human or of
Sick birds.
Yeah. Either way, we all need some type of food. And so that kind of transfers into my next topic with our grain markets from 2015. Corn price was expected to be low, and it stayed low, and it didn't move very much. And so that's something that was really hard. We had the most acres of corn planted in 2015, and we had great weather all throughout the nation. We had a bumper crop. We had more production than we needed, and
Price stayed down.
Price stays down. So that was a little sad, disheartening, but, everybody likes to hear when farmers have a good production year. They get good yields. That's great.
It's a lot less stressful, don't you think, when we have a year where the crops are doing well? Don't they just have, good, happy feelings about that? Not stressed, like if it's a drought or something.
I think they probably are a little happier, and then when
Then
harvest
they're not
comes,
so happy
when they're
when
wanting
they
to try to
sell.
not so much. There has been in 2015, and it's still actually kind of coming over into 2016, the ethanol industry has really been able to pump out a lot more ethanol because of the low cost of grain. With that, they produce a byproduct that's called a DDG, which is a distilled dried grain. Most of the time, that's utilized for feed production. So that goes back into our livestock. I know it is also an export. Some of the Asian countries do use it in some of their foods.
They eat it, yeah.
Yes. And so corn has offered that byproduct of distilled grain to really be very, very affordable and productive to feed to their livestock. And so I know there are individuals that have switched to feeding dried distillers over a silage. Their input cost on silage is going to be very expensive product to make. That DDG isn't very expensive. It's a byproduct. They can get ahead lower cost on feed if they feed that DDG. So that's a good thing we did see in 2015. Talking about exports, I'm going to kind of quiz you here, Peggy.
Oh, boy.
Which country do you think imported the most soybeans?
Which country imported the most?
Continent, I'll even give you.
Ooh, a continent. Soybeans. South America.
No.
Oh.
It's actually China.
Oh.
Because you
I would think they could grow some in China.
they just haven't got quite the yields that they need.
They don't have as much
and
as
you
they
think
need.
about
They got a lot of people over there, so it makes sense they'd have to import a lot of things.
people. Whenever they use a lot of soy sauce. I'm just gonna say with your
True.
Chinese, your Asian cuisine, there's a lot of that. And soybean, actually, China was the #1 importer of soybeans for 2015. They are actually switching roles. They're actually cutting off a lot of their imports from America when it comes to soybeans, and so that.
So they're going to grow some more.
Actually, what's being done is Brazil in South America, they have been growing a lot of soybeans. They've had a really good year. Looks like their production yields are going to be fantastic. And they actually have a lot of soybeans on hand from last year that they're selling to China for a cheaper price. And so that's kind of how that's happening. But the global market really does play an effect on our prices here. And so what we projected as an $8 or $9 bushel soybean really last year was more like a $6 or $7. Looking for the future, we're at that $8.50 mark again for soybeans. I don't know how that's going to play out. Hopefully it will stay up. But we'll see how that goes. And of course, our crops that we grow plentiful here in North Dakota are wheat, our sunflower, and our barley. Barley really, we didn't have many acres dedicated to barley. That kind of goes back to those malting contracts. So we all know what the malting contracts are for, right? Okay. So
Jen, you know, malting.
Well, if our listeners don't know, that then goes into beer. So Anheuser-Busch.
I thought you were for sure going to guess that, Jim.
So they do run a lot of the market on barley. And so we'll kind of see how those contracts feel out for 2016. Sunflower, we're seeing a lot of push to growing oil seeds. And so, and confection flours, actually. And because they're supposed to be gluten and they're higher in omegas, I think. And so there's kind of that nutrition health push is coming into our agriculture systems. And we're going to see more sunflowers grown. I think there'll be more acres dedicated for sunflower this coming year. And lastly, just looking for last year, we had really good weather. I mean, honestly, we weren't too dry. We got rain when we needed it. We maybe didn't get enough, but we got enough to hold us. Yep. And so forage cuttings, so grasses. We've got a lot of cattle out there that are grazing. Sometimes we have to do our cuttings to be able to feed them later on, or maybe that's what you are selling. And so we had a great year for multiple cuttings, a lot of really good TDN values. That's your total digestible nutrition, or nutrient, actually. And so those were really good. We had a good weathered year. So I hear that Jim is pushing our music. So I think we will be taking a break.
Right now, 16.
Here's Sean Hannity, weekday afternoons on Super Talk 1270.
All right, welcome back to the Extension Connection. I'm Peggy Netzer with Ashley Stegman. We were talking about highlights from 2015. Year in review, we should call it that. Everyone's doing a year in review on things.
Like a good idea.
So we were talking when we left about crops.
Yes, our different crops and kind of where they were in 2015 and what we see there, what we think they might do in 2016. One of the crops that I'm going to highlight, which I don't think we talk enough about. I see canola actually gaining some acres, and I think that might be a pretty good crop to consider for this year. Looking at the futures, it does look like it might be one that might trend on the upward versus the downward trend. So you always want to kind of be on the uphill of the market. But yeah, those were kind of the, big points that happened in 2015.
I would love it if we had more fields with canola and sunflowers because I think they're so pretty.
They are pretty, aren't they? They are very pretty.
Yep. I like wheat too. I think wheat is pretty when it's
I have to say,
in a field.
and you might agree because we do kind of come from the same area back home. North Dakota has the prettiest fields.
Yes.
You just
back
don't
home. What do we
find-
have? Soybeans
Or corn.
Once in a while, peas.
Oh, we
That's
don't have
about it.
peas. No, it's pretty much green
Yeah,
on green.
corn
all the time.
or
Yep.
soybeans.
Yep.
Pretty
all
much.
the time. So I do agree. I totally love the diversity of crops that we have in
or
North
flax.
Dakota.
Flax is beautiful when
Flax
it's in the
is
field.
very beautiful too. And so like I said, the diversity is great here, and the ability to really grow and harvest all these crops is something very special because it does take a really good farmer to be able to produce all these different commodities. And so I guess with that highlight from last year, I just want to thank all of our farmers and our ranchers, our ag producers for doing such a good job in 2015
And keeping us all fed.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Like I have to say, every time I open my fridge, my kids they're starting to learn where their food comes from and everything.
Yep.
They're young yet.
Mine, even now in the winter, he will ask, who grew this in their garden? And I'm like, well, that one I'm not sure because we had to buy it at the grocery store.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yep.
everything we eat, he wants to know whose garden did it come from.
Well, yeah, and that's great, and we need to continue to help our younger kids, our younger generation, to understand where their food's coming from, and that's actually a great segue. I was gonna.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I was going to talk about our horticulture kind of year in review and how that all
Busy.
went.
That's how it went.
It was very busy. No matter if you have a nice year, which we did, like I said, adequate rainfall. It got warm. It wasn't hot.
If the ditch grass is growing well, that means the grass at your house is growing well. So you got to do a lot of mowing.
Yes, there was
And
a
then
lot of
people
mowing.
notice other things when they're out there, like, oh, this needs work, or there's a bug over here.
Oh, yes,
Weeds.
definitely. Weeds. Oh, you would think with snow on the ground, we wouldn't have a lot of questions on weeds. Just this morning, I actually fielded a question on weeds in in a gentleman's pasture and what he should apply next year. And I thought, we need to just wait till next year and see what
Let
comes
the snow
up.
melt. Then figure it out.
I know you're being proactive, and that's great. That's awesome, and that's really what it came down to. I said, it's just time management. You need to get out there earlier, to spray, and I think that would solve your problem. But let the snow thaw first.
Yeah.
Let's let some growing happen. And so talking about our growing year for our gardeners, we did have a really nice warm up. April was really, really warm. Everything thawed out nice, and then we had a late
Cold.
snap. And that kind of set us back. And that hurt a lot of gardeners. There's
People
always,
get so eager because the sun comes out and the snow melts, and we're all so excited.
and we think it's gonna be Arizona weather,
And we
we're gonna be good.
forget that this is North Dakota, and you know what?
Exactly.
You plant your garden, and you can in April, and you can almost guarantee we're going to get a snowstorm after that.
Yep.
It's like the forces of nature recognize that you're being too ambitious, and they shut it down. There goes your garden.
Yep. Well, and last year we had usually there's kind of an old wives' tale of you can plant your potatoes at Easter time.
Easter Sunday.
Yep.
Put them in the
Easter
ground.
Sunday, put them in the ground. Well, here we had Easter late.
Yep.
And so that kind of changed things. And looking at this year, it looks like Easter's going to be early, the end of March. So I don't I wouldn't go by that this year. Maybe if, you have Easter in April, it's okay, but not in March. That might be just too early. But yes, that late cold snap really set us back. A lot of people had any type of fruit type trees, especially like your choke cherries, your hascups. You probably didn't see much production on them because they budded out and then they got severed. And so they just were not productive this year. And then, of course, weather was an issue. We say we had an adequate, not too wet or anything, but we had some really damaging weather, windstorms, actually.
I lost a lot of trees.
Exactly. Everywhere. Late June, I remember we lost so many trees. It was almost like a war zone driving around in Bismarck because there were so many trees, down power lines. There was just damage everywhere. And so, just remembering those pruning tips when it comes spring. If you didn't do it in the fall, if you see a branch that's maybe hanging over your neighbor's property or your garage, if you see it not, blooming out like it should, it might just be time to take it down. I hate seeing a mature tree because, let's face it, in North Dakota, we don't have a lot of trees. So I really hate losing trees. But I was asked to go out on a phone call or a home visit, and it was the end of June, and this gentleman's tree fell on his neighbor's home. And it was right down the middle of the home, and it was a sad and ugly sight. And it's just, you better be safe than sorry. You don't want anybody to get hurt or have any serious damage.
I like that you just mentioned the house calls, because I think that's one thing that people don't know that they have available to them is to not just calling Extension, but the city forester is another resource. If you have a question about a tree, do we need to take this down? You can call and ask. Someone will help you. Or if it's like, if it's diseased and it needs to come down, or is it something that can be cured some other way and help you save the tree?
Yep, exactly. And I will tell you, there's a lot of services that are great at cutting trees down. That's their job. So if you ask them what they think, they are going to tell you it needs to come down. So
and pay us to do it.
Exactly.
We'll do it for you.
And so make sure you know if it's a diseased tree or if it really needs to come down before you make that decision. Because I will tell you, the guy on the chainsaw is not going to be able to tell you whether it's diseased or if it really needs to come down or not. He's just going to do his job. So we want to make sure. Do the pruning that you need. If you have questions on any type of pruning, please don't feel afraid to call our extension office, any extension office, whatever county you're in. Our number, 221-6865.
Yep.
I am learning that. I have been almost in Burleigh County for a year, so I should know that. I'm getting there. Another thing with gardening that I guess personally, if you like to grow peppers, maybe your peppers didn't do so well for you. And that's
a lot of people had pepper issues this year.
Yep, and that is because we didn't have hot temperatures. And so at night, when they need that warmth to keep them warm, they just didn't get it.
Yep.
And so that's why maybe
kind of wimpy.
Your peppers were maybe wimpy. They just didn't have
no flavor.
The flavor, the tang, the spice. I know we tried to do some habaneros, just didn't get really the heat we were wanting. And that directly goes back to the lack of warmth and hot weather. Like I said, we had adequate rainfall. One thing we did still have issues with, which I think you're always going to have issues with, tomato blight.
Every year,
blossom
end rot.
Yes.
This is something I learned about since I've come here, because every single year we have to send out a press release about blossom end rot, because every year we have a problem with it.
Yes. So,
inconsistent water.
That is right. So for our listeners, blossom end
rot.
rot.
Those are the two ag things I learned.
Yes, and voles are a pain. That'll come up, I'm sure, again. That blossom end rot is Exactly. It's an in rot on a tomato. It's a deficiency in calcium. So when you start to see kind of that black on the bottom, it means that you are lacking something in your soils. Some people will put bone meal in their...
Or eggshells. I've heard
or
eggshells.
Eggshells might be an easier option. Grind the eggshells up and put them in the garden in your soil. Can help with some of that blight issue that happens. And
Preemptive.
Yes, preemptive.
Yes.
The other thing with tomato blight, blossom end rot, is watering. Stay away from overhead watering. I will tell you that. That is one management.
Tomatoes don't like it.
They don't like it. Would you like water sprinkled on your head every day?
I mean, I take a shower, so
I suppose
kind
we
of.
do. Yeah, that doesn't really work. But anyways, it's just not very effective. You
It's
need
cold,
to be,
though.
Yeah, it's
when
cold.
you're
And
in
you
the
have to be
garden.
watering at the base of your plant. That's the best
Yeah.
option.
Okay. Take a break, and we'll talk about tomatoes when we get back.
All right.
Right now, it's 18.
The home for ABC News at the top of the hour is Super Talk 1270.
All right, welcome back to the Extension Connection. I'm Peggy Netzer here with Ashley Stegman. And when we left, we were talking about tomatoes as part of our 2015 year in review. So just talking about some of the highlights that we had last year, or maybe not highlights if we're talking about diseases, but things that we heard a lot about.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and like we had been talking about, whether it's your crops or your garden produce, weather does affect, especially with any of those diseases that come on. Weather is actually the instigator in a lot of the diseases.
And you have no control over
You
it.
really
That's the
don't.
hard part.
Yeah, exactly. I think back, wheat is very susceptible to head blight, and that's really because it's wet and it doesn't dry out. And so we didn't have a bad issue in 2015. 2014 there was quite a bit of an issue, especially in the western part of the state. And so really weather is the culprit for a lot of these diseases that we have to deal with. And kind of just looking ahead, talking about weather, what are we going to expect? Are we going to
El Nino. That's why it's
Nino?
so warm. That's what I keep hearing.
Where is it warm?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I don't
feel
know.
like we had sort of a mild season so far.
We did,
So
we did.
far.
We did.
It hasn't
we had
been bad.
a late, warm fall,
Yeah.
if you will. And so
I feel
that
like this
was-
winter, though, it hasn't been as cold for as long. Like, we'll get cold days, but not long stretches of below zeros yet. I mean, it is the beginning of January, so it could come, but...
It always could come.
And we don't have that much snow yet.
No, we don't. Actually, okay, so Jim's showing us a story that's on NBCnews.com.
Oh, yeah? El
String
Nino.
of storms hitting California due to El Nino that's tied for strongest ever. I received the Farm and Ranch Guide, and there's a good article in here written by Leon Osborne. He is he's with University of North Dakota. He is a meteorologist there, and he entitled his story here, El Nino is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And so, yes, El Nino is definitely a factor. We are dealing with it. We're right now seeing a lot of that Arctic jet stream. I guess I'm not a meteorologist, but it's all kind of over North Dakota.
Yeah.
So if you look at the weather,
It's gonna
for the
get
next couple
cold.
days, yeah, we have like a high of -2 this weekend.
Awesome.
So it's going to get really cold, and that's why we're having these really frigid temperatures. Mr. Osborne does see that as for winter in the upper Midwest this year, he suggests that the region will experience above normal temperatures, which minus this weekend.
Except for this week, yeah.
Throughout the rest of the winter. In terms of precipitation, west across the northern plains you go, the less precipitation you will experience. So
We're on the fringe.
we are kind of on the fringe. Hopefully, I always kind of have to think about our western part of North Dakota, because western North Dakota is always, ever since I've moved up here, I was told they're always one rain away from a
Yep.
drought. And so you always kind of have to worry about our farmers, ranchers out in that area because, there's a lot of them out there. And if
They don't like below average
they don't
rainfall
like, no.
or snow or whatever. Precipitation.
Exactly. So moving towards springtime and planting season, farmers can expect below normal precipitation, especially in western North Dakota and South Dakota. Below normal soil moisture conditions that we have in a large portion of the upper Midwest may be enough to get things started, and precipitation should be sufficient enough to get things off to a good start. That is what
We like to hear that anyway.
Yes, that is a positive note. So those words are Mr. Osborne's from University of North Dakota, and so I know he's done quite a few talks on what to expect because when it comes to weather, when it comes to farming, ranching, weather does play a big role.
It's a big deal, yeah.
And so, we do kind of need to think about, what's going to happen? How is this going to affect us? So hopefully this El Nino stuff, pans out.
It's good for
okay
us.
for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hate to see other parts of the country affected poorly by it, but, I live here in North Dakota.
Yes.
So I guess that's kind of
We want it good for us.
Yeah,
We don't want it terrible for other people, but we sure want it good for us.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So, just to kind of, I guess, wrap up when talking.
Yeah, before we go.
Yeah, before we go. There was another article. I have to say, I really like Farm and Ranch Guide. They do a great job with some of their articles in there. And this article was kind of talking about the world of agriculture and where it's going and what to look forward to in, 2016. Mm-hmm. Well, right now we're seeing, many involved in farming, in ranching, production ag, they're having to switch roles. Because most of them, they're from that baby boomer generation. Mm-hmm. And so they're getting to the age where
they want to retire.
And by God, they probably
should.
put enough time into it. Maybe they need to.
Yep.
So, maybe they're switching roles and becoming more of a manager versus doing the day-to-day work. And so, many of these farmers, they're tasked with managing employees or maybe family members. Maybe that's their day-to-day now.
Yeah.
And so that requires a different skill set. That requires different, tact sometimes. I know talking personally from my family, we do have a family farm. My dad passed it on to my brother. My dad goes out to the farm maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And that's all he can do.
Check on things.
Yeah. He has definitely moved into the checker type thing. He just does that because at some point you kind of do shift into that
And let someone else do the hard work.
Exactly. Yeah. You've busted your
time.
back for how long, so you can now take a break type thing. But when we're talking about changing that role from being the day-to-day into worker on the farm or on the operation, moving to that effective manager and having a different skill set. Some things maybe you have to work on is that self-development. Personally develop those skills to be able to manage employees, managing family members, who's going to take care of this, who's going to do this, being able to not just be like, well, I'm going to do it, no one else is, being
you got to have those conversations.
You got to have those conversations. And
everyone understands the same way.
You have to be able to delegate the workload versus take the workload.
Right.
So those are some things that, that's one thing that maybe some of our listeners are dealing with. Other things are leadership skills, especially when you take on more of that effective manager position. You have to be able to lead your operation and really be able to be the one that says yes or no on the decision and be able to stand with it. And another thing that's important, I know sometimes we get into squabbles about this on family farms, is you have to be open-minded. What one person thinks compared to another person may not be the same thing, but we have to be open-minded to listen to each other, to know kind of what each other wants in the operation. And then another thing that we're seeing a lot more farmers, ranchers be involved with is working with consultants. Good managers use a variety of consultants to improve their operation. So other than just, maybe grumbling about your neighbor and how he's doing something,
Right.
you might, want to talk to him and ask him maybe more as a resource of, well, how's that working for you? Versus, not having any of those
You know what this makes me think of?
conversations. What?
All these old farmers, and I say old farmers because back home it was all the older farmers that would have these 5 a.m. coffees.
Exactly.
So they have 5 a.m. coffee.
Yep.
And they talk to their neighbors about what they're seeing and what they're doing.
Exactly.
They didn't have, consultants quite the same
Yep.
way that they have access to now.
So consultant might not be the right,
yeah.
term type
You're still
thing.
consulting
But
your
you're
neighbor.
still, and so maybe you don't understand why Dad's going to the elevator at 6 a.m.
Yep.
for,
He's going for coffee.
He's probably asking his consultants what he should do.
It's man gossip. That's what it is.
I know my dad is one now that goes in with the coffee crowd, and that's what they do. And so, I think with that time spent and then being open to planning, I think there's a lot of things that happen at coffee time with those old farmers that, I don't know would happen otherwise.
Right.
And so, just empowering you to, build on some of these skills, and don't be worried to switch your role into managing more. Evaluate your operation. Decide on the direction of how you want to move on. And this can be really significant in the success of your operation today and for the future.
And if anybody has questions about succession planning, I know you have a thing coming up, so they can give you a call at our office,
Yep.
right? 221-6865.
Yes.
All right, we are out of time. I'm going to say my final
Your final
My
goodbye.
final farewell for
All
the
right.
Extension Connection.
Alrighty, well, I want to
All
thank
right.
Peggy for all the work that she has done, and we will be back in 2
2 weeks.
Thank you.